You are not walking into 2026 as a blank slate. You are walking in carrying receipts, memories, lessons, scars, and quiet victories that nobody applauded. And before you rush to reinvent yourself, I need you to honor the version of you that survived what almost broke you. You don't rebuild from denial. You rebuild from truth. You rebuild from the honest acknowledgement that some things didn't work, some people didn't stay, some prayers didn't get answered the way you imagined, and yet you are still here, still breathing, still becoming. Rebuilding yourself is not about erasing the past. It's about refusing to let the past be the architect of your future. Too many people walk into a new year with old blueprints, trying to construct something new with the same mindset that collapsed the last version. You cannot expect new fruit from old soil that was never tended. This year calls for excavation. It calls for you to dig up the lies you told yourself just to survive seasons that are now over. You don't need those coping mechanisms anymore. You don't need to shrink, numb, hustle yourself into exhaustion, or prove your worth through overachievement. Rebuilding is uncomfortable because it forces you to confront who you became to survive rather than who you were created to be. Some of you learned to be strong because you weren't allowed to be soft. Some of you learned to be silent because your voice was dismissed. Some of you learned to overfunction because no one showed up consistently. But survival skills are not the same as destiny tools. What kept you alive is not always what will keep you aligned. 2026 is asking you to release the armor and relearn how to move without flinching at every sound. You don't rebuild yourself by becoming harder. You rebuild yourself by becoming whole. Wholeness means you stop fragmenting your identity to fit into spaces that were never designed to hold you. It means you stop editing your needs so you don't inconvenience others. It means you stop calling burnout drive and calling anxiety discernment. This is the year you tell the truth about what drains you and what restores you, even if it disappoints people who benefited from your silence. Rebuilding yourself requires grief. Grief for the version of you that tried so hard. Grief for the dreams that expired because timing and wisdom had not yet met. Grief for the relationships that couldn't go where you were going. You cannot rush past this part. If you skip grief, you rebuild on denial, and denial cracks under pressure. Let yourself mourn without shame. Let yourself feel without apologizing. Healing is not weakness, it is maintenance. This year is not about becoming unrecognizable to others. It's about becoming recognizable to yourself again. There was a time when you trusted your instincts before the world taught you to doubt them. There was a time when your joy didn't need permission. Rebuilding means reconnecting with that inner voice that knew when to stay and when to go, when to rest and when to rise. You don't need more external validation. You need internal clarity. Some of you are trying to rebuild your life without rebuilding your boundaries. That's like installing new windows but leaving the doors unlocked. You have to decide what no longer gets access to you. Not everyone who has history with you has permission to have a future with you. Boundaries are not punishments, they are protection. They are the framework that keeps your rebuilding from collapsing again. Rebuilding yourself also means redefining success. Success is not just what you accumulate. It's what you can sustain without losing yourself. It's waking up without dread. It's being able to rest without guilt. It's choosing peace over performance. 2026 is not asking you to do more. It's asking you to do what matters with intention. Alignment will take you further than exhaustion ever could. You may feel behind, but you are not late. You are right on time for the version of you that is finally ready to listen. Growth doesn't move in straight lines. It moves in layers. Sometimes you revisit lessons not because you failed, but because you are now capable of understanding them at a deeper level. Stop shaming yourself for needing time. Seeds grow underground before they ever break the surface. This rebuilding will require courage because familiar dysfunction often feels safer than unfamiliar freedom. You know how to survive chaos, but peace requires a new skill set. Peace requires you to sit with yourself without distraction. It requires you to trust quiet seasons. It requires you to believe that you don't have to struggle to be worthy. That belief alone can change everything. As you step into 2026, don't ask who you need to become to be accepted. Ask who you need to release to be free. Release the version of you that thought love had to hurt. Release the version of you that thought rest was laziness. Release the version of you that confused attention with affection. You are not rebuilding to impress. You are rebuilding to last. This is your permission to start again without shame, to rebuild slowly, to choose yourself daily, to honor your limits, to trust the process even when it feels quiet. You are not starting from scratch. You are starting from experience, wisdom, and resilience. And this year you are laying bricks with intention, patience, and faith, becoming someone who no longer survives life but stands firmly in it, rooted, aware, and ready to rise into everything you were always becoming. Rebuilding begins the moment you stop pretending that everything was fine. It starts when you allow yourself to admit that some seasons hurt more than you expected, that some choices were made out of fear rather than faith, and that some versions of you were created just to survive environments that were never meant to sustain you. Honesty is not self-betrayal, it is self-respect. When you tell the truth about what you endured, you stop carrying the weight of pretending, and you create space for real healing to take place. Many people think rebuilding means starting over as if nothing happened, but that kind of denial only delays growth. You cannot erase experiences that shaped you, and you don't need to. Every disappointment taught you discernment. Every loss taught you depth. Every delay taught you patience, even when you didn't realize it at the time. Honesty allows you to extract wisdom instead of living in regret. It helps you see that what felt like failure was often preparation in disguise. There were moments when you ignored your intuition because you didn't trust yourself yet. Moments when you stayed too long, gave too much, or accepted less than you deserved because you were afraid of what would happen if you chose yourself. Rebuilding asks you to look at those moments without judgment, not to shame yourself, but to understand yourself. You did what you knew how to do with the tools you had at the time. Growth doesn't come from self-condemnation. It comes from self-awareness. Honesty also requires you to recognize the patterns you developed to cope. Some of you learned to be agreeable so you wouldn't be abandoned. Some of you learned to be strong so you wouldn't be disappointed. Some of you learned to stay busy so you wouldn't have to feel. These patterns once protect, edge you, but protection can turn into limitation when it overstays its purpose. Rebuilding means thanking those patterns for their service and then releasing them when they no longer serve your future. You cannot rebuild with the same lies you once told yourself to make it through. Lies like "this is just how life is," or "I don't need help," or "if I just try harder, things will change." Honesty invites you to question those narratives. It gives you permission to say, "This isn't working anymore," without attaching your worth to the admission. Admitting something is broken doesn't make you broken, it makes you brave. There is also honesty about grief. Grief for time lost, for versions of yourself that never got the chance to fully bloom, for relationships that ended before you were ready. Too often, people rush past grief because they think it means they're stuck in the past. But unprocessed grief doesn't disappear. It just hides in your reactions, your fears, and your hesitations. Rebuilding requires you to sit with that grief long enough to understand what it's been trying to teach you. Honesty will challenge the stories you've been telling about yourself. Stories that label you as behind, unqualified, or unworthy because things didn't unfold according to your timeline. When you're honest, you begin to see that delay does not mean denial, and struggle does not mean failure. Sometimes it simply means you were learning lessons that couldn't be skipped. Reframing your story with truth allows you to move forward without dragging unnecessary shame into the next season. Rebuilding also involves being honest about your needs. You are allowed to need rest. You are allowed to need support. You are allowed to need clarity before commitment. Pretending you don't need these things might make you appear strong, but it slowly disconnects you from yourself. Strength rooted in H. Honesty is sustainable. Strength rooted in denial eventually collapses. You may discover through honesty that some dreams need to be redefined, not abandoned. What you once wanted may no longer align with who you are becoming, and that doesn't make you inconsistent. It means you are evolving. Rebuilding gives you the freedom to update your vision without apologizing for outgrowing old expectations, including the ones you placed on yourself. Honesty is the foundation because it grounds you in reality instead of fantasy. It helps you rebuild with clarity instead of comparison. It allows you to say, this is where I am, this is what I have learned, and this is what I am ready for now. From that place, growth becomes intentional rather than reactive, and rebuilding becomes an act of self-trust rather than self-correction. For a long time, strength was defined by how much you could endure without breaking. You learned to keep going even when you were exhausted, to stay composed even when you were unraveling inside, and to call it resilience when it was really self-abandonment. Becoming harder felt like the only option because softness had once cost you something. But wholeness is not about how much pain you can tolerate. It is about how much truth you are willing to honor within yourself. Wholeness asks you to stop glorifying survival as the ultimate achievement. Survival was necessary, but it was never meant to be permanent. You were not created to live in constant defense mode, bracing for impact, waiting for the next disappointment. When you build your life around hardness, you limit your ability to receive joy, rest, and connection. Rebuilding requires you to soften the places you armored up. Even when that feels risky, many people confuse productivity with purpose and endurance with character. They push themselves beyond healthy limits and call it discipline, while quietly ignoring the cost to their emotional and mental well-being. Wholeness challenges that narrative. It asks whether the life you are building can actually hold you, or whether it only looks impressive from the outside. A life that drains you is not evidence of commitment. It is often evidence of misalignment. To become whole, you have to allow all parts of you to have a voice, not just the parts that perform well. The tired part deserves acknowledgement. The confused part deserves patience. The grieving part deserves space. When you silence these parts in the name of strength, they don't disappear. They resurface as burnout, resentment, or disconnection. Wholeness is integratio, N, not elimination. It is learning how to listen inwardly without panic or judgment. Hardness teaches you to push through warning signs. Wholeness teaches you to pay attention. It teaches you to notice when your body is tense, when your spirit feels heavy, when your joy has been replaced by obligation. These signals are not weaknesses, they are information. Rebuilding means respecting those signals instead of overriding them for the sake of approval or achievement. There is a difference between being capable and being whole. Capability focuses on what you can do. Wholeness focuses on who you are. While doing it, you can be highly capable and deeply disconnected at the same time. Wholeness brings alignment between your values, your actions, and your inner life. It allows you to show up fully without leaving parts of yourself behind in the process. Becoming whole also requires boundaries, not as walls, but as guidelines for self-respect. When you operate from hardness, you often say yes out of obligation and no out of fear. Wholeness gives you the courage to choose intentionally. It reminds you that access to you is earned through respect, not demanded through history or familiarity. Boundaries protect your energy so that you can give from abundance rather than depletion. Many people learn to be strong because vulnerability once led to disappointment. They equate openness with danger and control with safety. But wholeness does not mean exposing yourself recklessly. It means discerning where and when to be open. It means allowing yourself to be seen in spaces that are safe enough to hold your truth. Without vulnerability, connection remains shallow and growth remains limited. Rebuilding yourself through wholeness means redefining rest. Rest is not something you earn after you've proven your worth. It is a necessary component of clarity and creativity. When you rest, you give your mind and body permission to reset, to process, to restore. Hardness resists rest because it fears falling behind. Wholeness understands that rest is what keeps you aligned and sustainable. Wholeness also frees you from the need to perform healing. You don't have to look put together to be making progress. You don't have to rush your growth to reassure others. Healing is not linear, and wholeness allows for setbacks without self-punishment. It teaches you to respond to yourself with compassion instead of criticism. When you choose wholeness over hardness, you stop measuring your value by how much you can carry. You begin to measure it by how authentically you live. Rebuilding from this place allows you to move forward without constantly bracing for collapse. It gives you permission to build a life that feels as good on the inside as it looks on the outside, rooted in alignment, self-respect, and a deep sense of internal peace. Rebuilding yourself cannot happen in an open field where anything and everything has access to you. Alignment requires protection, and protection begins with clarity about what belongs in your life and what does not. For a long time, you may have measured loyalty by how much you were willing to tolerate, how often you showed up even when it cost you peace. But rebuilding demands a new definition, one that values mutual respect over familiarity and alignment over obligation. Boundaries are often misunderstood as rejection, but in reality, they are declarations of self-awareness. They communicate what you can give without losing yourself and what you can no longer carry without consequence. When you rebuild without boundaries, you recreate the same cycles in a different season. You cannot expect new outcomes while granting the same access that led to exhaustion, resentment, or confusion. Boundaries are not about controlling others. They are about honoring your limits. Many people struggle with boundaries because they fear being misunderstood or labeled as selfish. They learned that their worth was tied to availability, that saying yes was the price of belonging. But alignment teaches you that overextension is not generosity, it is self-neglect. When you constantly abandon yourself to keep others comfortable, you quietly teach them that your needs are optional. Rebuilding calls you to reverse that lesson. Alignment requires you to be honest about what drains you and what restores you. Some environments celebrate you only for what you produce, not for who you are. Some relationships thrive on your silence more than your truth. Boundaries give you the freedom to step back from spaces that require you to perform instead of participate. You are allowed to choose peace over proximity, even when it means disappointing people who benefited from your lack of limits. Rebuilding yourself also means redefining success in a way that supports your alignment. Success is not just reaching goals, it is reaching them without losing your sense of self. You can achieve everything you set out to accomplish and still feel empty if your life is misaligned with your values. Alignment asks whether your pace is sustainable, whether your priorities reflect what truly matters to you, and whether your achievements come at the cost of your well-being. Boundaries protect not only your time and energy, but your vision. When too many voices have access to your decisions, clarity becomes diluted. Everyone has an opinion about what you should do, how fast you should move, and who you should become. Alignment teaches you to filter external input through internal conviction. You don't need to explain every boundary you set. Some decisions are sacred because they preserve your peace and purpose. Rebuilding often involves release, eyeing relationships that no longer align with who you are becoming. This can be one of the most painful parts because history creates a sense of obligation. But growth changes needs, and alignment honors that change without guilt. Letting go does not erase the impact people had on your life. It simply acknowledges that their role may have been seasonal. Holding on out of loyalty to the past can prevent you from fully stepping into the future. Boundaries also apply to how you engage with yourself. Alignment means setting limits on negative self-talk, comparison, and unrealistic expectations. You cannot rebuild with an inner voice that constantly criticizes your progress. Protecting your internal environment is just as important as guarding your external one. The way you speak to yourself shapes the way you move through the world. When you operate from alignment, your yes becomes more powerful because it is no longer driven by fear. You say yes to opportunities that resonate with your values, not just your ego. You say no to distractions that look good but pull you off course. Boundaries create space for intentional living, allowing you to invest your energy where it produces growth rather than depletion. Rebuilding with boundaries teaches you that peace is not passive, it is protected. Alignment is not accidental, it is chosen daily through small, consistent decisions. Each boundary you set reinforces the message that your well-being matters. Each aligned choice strengthens your confidence and clarity, helping you build a life that is not just successful by external standards, but sustainable, grounded, and deeply fulfilling. There is a quiet pressure that comes with the start of a new year, a sense that you should be further along, more accomplished, more certain than you feel right now. That pressure can trick you into rushing your growth, measuring your life against someone else's highlight reel, and making decisions out of anxiety instead of intention. But real transformation does not respond well to urgency rooted in fear. Intentional growth moves at the pace of understanding, not comparison. You are not behind because your path does not look like someone else's. Timing is not a competition, and progress is not always visible. Some of the most important work happens beneath the surface, where roots are forming and foundations are being strengthened. When you rush this process, you risk building something that looks impressive but cannot withstand pressure. Intentional growth allows you to move forward with stability rather than speed. Many people feel the need to prove that they are evolving, that past mistakes no longer define them. This need to prove often leads to overcommitment, over-explanation, and burnout. But growth does not require an audience. You do not owe anyone a performance of your healing. In fact, constant proving can pull you away from the quiet discernment needed to make wise decisions. Intention asks you to move with purpose, even when no one is applauding. Patience is an underrated form of courage. It takes bravery to sit with uncertainty without forcing outcomes. It takes strength to trust that clarity will come without manipulation or haste. Intentional growth means resisting the urge to make permanent decisions in temporary emotional states. It means giving yourself time to gather wisdom before taking action, even when waiting feels uncomfortable. This season calls for listening more than striving, listening to your intuition, your energy levels, your emotional responses. These internal cues provide valuable guidance, but they are often drowned out by noise, expectations, and the pressure to keep up. Intentional growth creates space for reflection, allowing you to respond rather than react. From that space, your choices become more aligned and less driven by fear. You may revisit familiar lessons and wonder why they are still present in your life. This does not mean you failed to learn them before. It often means you are now ready to apply them in a deeper, more integrated way. Growth happens in layers, and each layer requires a different level of awareness. Rushing past a lesson does not eliminate it, it only delays its impact. Intention invites you to engage fully so you can move forward without repetition. Trusting the process can be difficult when progress feels slow. But slow growth often leads to lasting change. When you allow yourself the time to understand your patterns, values, and motivations, you build a foundation that supports long-term alignment. Intentional growth prioritizes sustainability over immediate results, recognizing that consistency matters more than intensity. There is also freedom in releasing the need to have everything figured out. Certainty can be comforting, but it is not always realistic. Intentional growth allows for exploration, adjustment, and recalibration. It acknowledges that clarity evolves as you do. You are permitted to change your mind, refine your goals, and take new directions as you gain insight. This approach to growth requires trust in yourself. Trust that you will recognize when it is time to move. Trust that pauses are not failures, but opportunities to integrate what you have learned. Trust that you do not need to rush into the next chapter to prove your worth. When you move with intention, each step is supported by understanding rather than pressure. As you continue forward, focus on progress that feels honest rather than impressive. Let your actions reflect your values instead of external expectations. Choose depth over speed, clarity over chaos, and patience over pressure. Intentional growth honors the truth that meaningful change unfolds through consistent, thoughtful choices, allowing you to build a future that is grounded, resilient, and authentically aligned. As you step forward into this new season, remember that rebuilding yourself is not a one-time decision, but a daily commitment to truth, wholeness, alignment, and intentional growth. You are not erasing who you were. You are honoring every version of yourself that carried you to this moment with the wisdom to choose differently now. The honesty you embrace becomes the foundation. The wholeness you pursue becomes the strength. The boundaries you set become the protection, and the patience you practice becomes the pathway. You are no longer rebuilding out of desperation or fear, but out of clarity and self-respect. This process will not always be loud, fast, or visible, but it will be deeply transformative. You are learning how to move without rushing, how to choose without proving, and how to grow without losing yourself. Every intentional step you take is teaching you that peace is possible, alignment is powerful, and becoming whole is worth the effort. You are not late. You are not broken, and you are not starting from nothing. You are rebuilding from experience, resilience, and truth. And this time you are building something that can last, something that can hold you, something that finally feels like home. And this is the year you rebuild yourself on purpose.